Welcome back, Embodied Woman. I have been really looking forward to the guest that I have on today. She has been such a muse and inspiration and such a woman who's really an integrity in her leadership. So I'm excited to hear what she's going to bring to the table today for all of you. Introducing Aislinn Walton. Hello.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to see what we dive into. I have a feeling it's going to be juicy.
I know. I couldn't agree with you more. Why don't we start off with you just introducing yourself to the community, who you are, what you do, and how you got into doing this work?
Yeah. So I'm Aislinn Walton. I am a success coach for women in business. And, the more I do this work, I really just see how important it is to expand beyond business and address the holistic aspects of life and ourselves as women and sensuality and our mindset, who we are in relationship and intimacy, and how that really does impact our ability to show up vibrantly, radiantly, abundantly, and generously, because when our cup is full, we can pour so much more into our projects, passion projects, all the things. So I have created, I think we're like over 1.4 all-time revenue in million dollars the last few years. I am, I'm just consistently running group programs, masterminds, one-on-one. I have one of my signature programs is called Orgasmic Manifestation, which is not just for business women, but it really does apply all of these kinds of practices to that holistic perspective of like, what does fulfillment and satisfaction look like as a woman, and how do we say yes to more and acknowledge our desires and give permission for all of that? So yeah, I got here, I'm sure like you, through a very interesting path. I started out as there were two parts of my lives that kind of met. So I was a web designer and graphic designer, and then I would go teach yoga. I was yoga obsessed back in like my early 20s. And, I kind of felt like they were at odds, spirituality and body, and then kind of the logic and the computer stuff, right? And like career meets soul. So I was just kind of, we know unconsciously I was manifesting eventually the roads were going to cross.
Yeah.
And they did. So I ended up just through mostly yoga and creating my own website and through posting on Instagram, I ended up just attracting women who wanted to learn more from me. I had a yoni egg shop on Etsy, which got shut down.
Oh my gosh, no way. They did not shut you down. Oh.
They shut me down. And they like withheld money from me. It was an odd time, but I took the business elsewhere. So there were a lot of like odds and ends kind of at the beginning. And I created a lot of success in this women's empowerment business. And then it translated into eventual business coaching where I am today. So that's the very short story of it.
I love it. I love it. I didn't know that you were in web design. So that's so cool.
Yeah. Yes, I was. I actually just went on a hike with my previous boss, Ingrid. She's a graphic and web designer here in Boulder. And she took me under her wing right out of college and just taught me, all of the like code basically and WordPress stuff. So yeah, it was a very helpful skill set to start my business that I didn't know I would be doing when I got into it, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how those things do manifest later on, because even in my background, I came from working at a bank. And so I was always in the energy of money. I was always in the energy of learning how to sell. And like now that's my path, but in a way that's aligned for me.
Absolutely.
And it's just so funny how those things happen.
I know. I find it to be like so fascinating, especially I'm sure you have clients who are trying to put together this part and this part, and you're not worried about it at all because you know that eventually those desires are going to merge. And it's all going to be brilliant and amazing.
We always find a way to like, especially people who are multi-passionate, like me. Like I can't decide. Don't ask me to decide. There's no way. But we always find a way to make it work so that it's of service to ourselves and to the world. So
absolutely.
So something that really caught my attention was I didn't know that you got shut down on Etsy for selling your yoni eggs.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of women who are probably listening to this who would encounter something like that and maybe take it as a sign that like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this or something like that. So I would love for you to speak to how you navigated that.
Yeah, thank you. I think at the time, I mean, I don't know if you share this quality. I'm sure you do, but you're just very stubborn and, in a good way, right? Like there's a shadow side to it, but when your heart is set on something or success is inevitable and you've just decided and you're resourceful in that, something like that, it might be a little bump in the road, but it's never a stop sign. Like it's never a dead end. So I just researched other opportunities and opened to Shopify. It's like, okay, well, if you don't want my business, fine. I'll
Yep.
take it elsewhere. And I just pivoted really quickly. And I think I'm sure you do this and continue to do this a lot in business, but pivoting and going where the energy is flowing, like you always need to be seeking that and, opening up to that. And when something shuts down, I think, yes, you're right. People have a tendency to be like, okay, all done. I guess it's not meant for me. And that's just not, there are, of course, nuances to that, but I really do believe that it's just an integrity check and it's just the universe saying like, well, how committed are you? Do you really want this? Are you all in or not?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Because I agree. I feel like every time we're about to up level, we test ourselves, like being the universe. Like we co-create these tests to be like, are you actually ready for this? Do you actually want this?
Yes. Yes.
And yeah. And it was also leading you to something so much bigger than what you could have probably imagined at the time. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I ended up, I mean, over time I did pivot out of actually selling material goods because it just wasn't really worth the time. And, I ended up just recommending other people's products and resources instead and focusing on my zone of genius as I grew. But it did, looking back, it did lead to more and more clarity of what's meant for me and where is my energy going in a way that's being amplified, or where is it going that's just taking me away from like my highest level of service and fulfillment ultimately. So yeah, just little baby steps that all add up, little stepping stones that eventually take you to where you want to go. And it all counts, it all matters.
It does. When did you start your business? Like how long have you been on this journey?
So I officially took my first coaching client in fall of 2017, but I'd had some unofficial clients
Yeah.
before that, like in real life. I had some yoga students who wanted more mentorship. I had, women who would like take private yoga classes with me would end up wanting more information on like feminine energy and spirituality. And so I'd have them over to my house for tea and we would just kind of brainstorm. And so I did charge for that. And I actually, through private yoga classes, I got to know a lot of really high level women. Like a lot of my clients were CEOs and women who had these like booming 7-figure businesses. I got to meet a lot of amazing people through them and A-list actors. And it was so exciting. I showed up one day and like, a couple of like really high level, I don't want to say their names, like really high level people were at this house. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're all doing a yoga class today. And I'm like, okay, I just saw you in a movie like literally 2 weeks ago. Like, whoo. I was a little
Wow.
starstruck, but it was so exciting because through connections, I think that that's what I'm pretty good at is just manifesting connections and the right people into my world. And through that, it ended up being a very organic process. And it's interesting because a lot of my clients, they just want to like jump into coaching via social media. And that was a huge part of why I started as well. I had quite a big Instagram following from being a yoga teacher and living in Central America. And I was like that girl posting yoga pictures on a beach. And
I love it.
started. But I would share my heart and soul every day on Instagram. Like it was my journal entry. And a lot of people became very trusting of me and inspired by me from that sharing. So the kind of people who just want to jump right into Instagram and start coaching businesses right now, I think, they have to understand it's going to take a little bit more effort and time and patience and commitment and devotion to that because it really can, everyone starts differently. And I think it's important that people are honest about how they started and where they started and what resources they had,
Yep.
and, all of that. So
yeah, I'm so happy you bring that up, because I think that like back in like 2020, when the coaching industry really started to like grow, but it wasn't what it was in 2017, right? Like like Instagram and social media in general, it became so different.
yeah.
And the expectations for a lot of people were kind of fell through.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I had a really interesting beginning in my business because I hit six figures in like 8 to 9 months.
Mhm.
And there were a few people who knew what it was, and there were a few people more people who didn't. And then once 2020 happened and all of the upset and everything and all of the political statements and everything and pandemic, and it just threw a lot of people into a quite a frenzy. And I think some people swam and made it work, and then some people kind of just sunk a little bit, and that's not bad or anything, and it's just, it is what it is. But yeah, I was just talking to one of my coaches yesterday, and she's like, the coaching industry has expanded and evolved so much just the last few years, and who I was and what I did that worked in the beginning doesn't necessarily translate to now. And so being that it's all about flexibility, it's all about innovation, and not being frustrated that what happened before or what worked before or what didn't, like, are all shifting.
Yeah. That reminds me of too is your specialty, which is feminine leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that just by you speaking to that and talking about that, like being able to pivot and being able to just like lead yourself through an ever evolving industry is so powerful. So I'm like, here's the mic. Let's just have you riff on feminine leadership, because I know that's your jam.
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. I think for feminine energy has become like the buzzword, hasn't it? Everyone wants to be embodied in their femininity. And I think it's a really great intention. I think it's a really fascinating societal shift, actually.
Yeah.
And I have some controversial opinions about, the feminism movement and how there was like a backfiring and then a pendulum swing and all of these kinds of things that are bringing women back into the awareness that feminine energy and femininity are really, they were previously, I don't know about you, but growing up, it was like, I can do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need no man. I can do it myself. I'm a woman show. And that was like the sign of strength and where your value came from as a woman. And so not just, not just subscribing to the mentality that this is valuable and this isn't. Like, there's such a gray area. And I don't think being feminine or being masculine is more or less valuable, because we're all worthy and lovable, all of that. Like, it's all just languaging. But feminine leadership is about really looking at where you're putting connection, intimacy, and relationship over conquering and challenge and hustle and competition and the things that ultimately, if you're looking at life force energy, are very depleting for feminine energy people, at least feminine energy dominant people, whether you're male, female, whatever anatomy you have. I do believe that if you're primarily feminine energy based, you will be a lesser version of yourself, less happy, less fulfilled, less satisfied, if you are still subscribed to those the elements of like what success looks like from more of that the previous and older mentalities of how to create that. So that's kind of the outline, and of course there's so much that we can dive into that's below that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dive in then, because there's so much there that, I think a lot of people comprehend, but the embodiment piece is like, it's like, that's the biggest disconnect. They get it. They hear the buzzword. They're like, oh yeah, feminine energy, feminine leadership. But like, what does it mean to actually like one, what does it mean? But also like, what's the, I guess, like, what are some tips that you have to actually anchor it in and like lead and be the embodiment of that?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest ones is to heal where you have this defense or fear or shame against being a woman or
Yes.
being feminine, right? Like you can't want to be more of something that you're holding a resistance around. And it's the same thing with money mindset, right? Like it's very hard to receive money if you're like money is bad and you're
Mhm.
projecting that judgment and criticism out into the world. So you have to first of all heal where you think that it is impossible to lead with softness, or where is softness and emotional connection and intimacy a sign of weakness? Where are you projecting that? And there's another side of the coin here. I just want to say really quickly, maybe quickly, we'll stop quick. But I also think that like being in feminine leadership also means you have a very healthy masculine side.
Yes. I
You
was
know,
actually going to ask you about that.
yeah, yeah, but it's not like this men are better than women or women are better than men mentality. Like it's much more energetic based. And it's about where you are holding these stories about what is good enough and what is going to be, who are you going to be that's the most lovable, valuable, successful. Um, and I have a story that I've worked through where it's like, I'm the oldest of three, and I'm kind of that goody two shoes type A person who, like I said before, like I'm stubborn. If I want something, I'm going to get it. And I have this shadow side of that too, which is like, when am I going to be good enough? And what is good enough? And I know because of doing the work, whether I have money or not, whether I'm in a relationship or not, whether I'm, blonde or not, you know what I'm saying? Like these pieces of our identity, I'm worthy, I'm lovable, I don't need to prove or convince that to anyone. But I think that within the feminine, masculine, energetic spectrum, people all come to the story with their own stories and
Yeah.
their own identity kind of cloaks of this matters and this doesn't, or this makes me lovable and this doesn't. And for men, it's similar. It's like, if I am emotional, if I share my heart, I will be seen as vulnerable and weak, and I won't be the leader. I won't be worthy of that.
Yeah.
So with all of these stories working, feminine leadership takes into account that, like, what's under the iceberg, and we want people to be in integrity while they create the life of their dreams.
Yeah.
And we want people to be honoring what feels best for them. And I really have seen this as a fascinating kind of like spicier side of this, where when a woman comes into union with her feminine energy and realizes that she is sensual and emotional and very creative and very intuitive, and all of that is valuable and worthy and powerful, like those are her gifts, she ends up creating that much more of an impact
Yeah.
because she is connecting to her deepest sense of life force and her sexuality and her, her womb space and the parts of her that maybe she felt like would have been used against her in previous lifetimes, right? And
Yeah.
now are actually the source of her magic, actually the source of her power. So it's fascinating.
Chills, the source of her power. And it's like the moment we stop neglecting and shaming is the moment we can actually receive the magic that lives
Yeah,
inside of us.
yeah, 100%. Like with all of my clients, I'm like, I want you to be so alive in your sexiness. I want you to be so alive in your ability to receive pleasure. I want you to be so alive in your ability to not just receive pleasure, but receive like gifts and abundance and money. And like, yes, like you get to receive that. And it's not just about hustling to generate and produce it. There's a
Yeah.
completely different way that a woman walks the world when she is not producing to like get something, but she is being a certain version of herself that attracts what is in alignment And if she's connected to her desires, then she ends up being a beacon and a lighthouse and a magnet for what she really does want. And she knows what to say no to also.
So good. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we also get to have boundaries and know what to say no to, know what to say yes to.
Yeah.
And I think that something that you brought up, I think is really important is that like non-attachment of our worth to our achievements or to the hustle or to the accolades. Like, yeah, go ahead.
That's so hard. I still struggle with that. I mean, most people do.
Yeah.
It's so fun to identify with like, I've created a 7-figure business and I make this amount of money per month, but like, if my money drops, who am I? If I have a lower month, who am I? And to be an observer of that emotion as it kind of just trickles through. Like I've had 60 plus multiple 5-figure months, 5-figure, multiple 5-figure months.
Yeah.
I think my brain would be like, you're fine. It's fine. You've got this. Evidence says this, you know? And then when I'm out of my power or I'm triggered or my nervous system is in fight or flight or freeze, or I'm dysregulated, you know, I have a family thing come up, I still am like, okay, still got some work to do there. And I think that that's really important to just say, like, no matter who you are, where you are, there's going to be the opportunity to like lean in. And this is intimacy work, right? Where it's, okay, it's not intimacy with outer relationships, it's intimacy with inner relationships. And I got to be open and transparent and not like push things under the carpet, which ends up creating more disconnection, obviously.
Yes, I love this so much. So I always tell my audience, be naked with your truth, right?
I
And
love that.
yeah, that's like that intimacy piece with yourself. Like let yourself be vulnerable with your shadows and with the triggers and the things that come up. Because if they didn't come up, you wouldn't know they exist, right?
Exactly.
And you would just be operating from that place of trauma and fear and shadow.
Yes, and a lot of people think that, and this is under the umbrella of feminine leadership too, which is if you acknowledge that, if you say that out loud, there's the fear of like, well, I'm bringing more energy to it, and that makes me more vulnerable, or that makes me like manifest more of that, you know, and that's not true at all. You're liberating yourself. There's, you know, of course, if you're repeating the story and you're not being accountable with yourself and you're not desiring to shift it or putting in that responsibility to shift it, then that's a different story, you know, and like we might want to work on that. But just acknowledging it, just saying it to your coach, just writing it down in your journal, just bringing out those levels of its density. You know, I think we always can, maybe for you, if you're really connected to your body, you know, you can feel like, oh, this is lightness versus this is dense.
Yeah.
And you want to just kind of ignore that dense feeling because it's scary. You're kind of worried, like, what's going to happen if I really bring awareness to that? But it is so liberating, especially to bring that into movement practices or embodiment practices. Bring that into your workout session. Bring that into your yoga practice. Bring that into breath work. Bring that into self-pleasure, you know, like work with it. And I'm sure like you have plenty of those tools that you recommend also, because you got to alchemize it. You got to work with it in the body too.
Yeah, so good. And I'm so happy that you brought up working out, because this was actually something I wanted to jive with you on, because what we have in common is like our deep desire to be of service to our bodies and like how we show. I mean, at least for me, I know how I show up for my bodies, how I show up in every corner of my life, my business, like my clients, everything.
Yes.
And yeah, and I always see you at the gym lifting, and I'm like, and it makes me so happy, because I know when I first got into the world of feminine leadership, I thought that, oh, like lifting weights is a masculine thing, so like I shouldn't do that. Like that was the first thing that I remember, like when I got into being a feminine leader. And then I started to miss it and crave it. And I wanted that structure. I wanted that routine. I wanted something to make me feel that inner fire and inner strength. And then I think that was around the time that I started following you. And it was such a permission slip to like do the things that are less feminine, right?
Yeah,
And Yeah. So go ahead. I would love to hear you
Yeah.
speak on that.
I love that. I've heard that so many times. And, women don't want to look bulky. They don't, oh, well, I mean, I would say the biggest reason women are afraid is because they don't want to look like a fool in the weightlifting room, and they don't know how, and they don't want to be embarrassed. And it's just like money, it's just like business. The more you get practiced in it, the more confident you are. And then you start to just like own it. And you
Yeah.
walk in and you're like, I've got this, But yeah, like starting out is very intimidating. And my dad is slash was, he's in his late 60s now, but he was an Olympic cyclist.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, like a national world or a world champion, like cyclist, and was in the Olympics. And so I grew up very active. My mom was also very active. Like both of them look fantastic. They're in their 60s and they both work out every day still.
Love that.
So I grew up in that world, but maybe people will resonate with this. When you're under that umbrella of your family, like you kind of want to go anti it.
Oh, yeah.
And just permission to like dismiss yourself from that, because it was almost like an obligation. Not that they would say that, but like to me, sometimes it felt that way. So for me, as I got older, I was just doing like a lot of cardio. And I remember in college, I'd be just like doing the elliptical, hoping for change.
Yeah.
And like nothing was changing. And I was on birth control and there was like a lot of hormonal stuff. And I just felt puffy all the time. And like I was not creating any shift.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to feel really excited about, and maybe I got this from Instagram, I don't know, but like you start seeing more women lifting.
Yeah.
And you start to see their gorgeous booties and their thighs for days.
Yep. Yep. So true.
Like, oh, like I want to look like that. But I also want to feel strong. So eventually I like started to, bridge weight training with my yoga practice and got better and better and stronger and stronger. And eventually it just became really ingrained as something that I just love to do. And I started to see my body shift, and building muscle is so rewarding. And it is what you were saying, like when you're feeling like you want to be more feminine, but then weightlifting, it feels more masculine. I think this is what we were talking about at the beginning, where, yeah, it is masculine and good. Like, do it, right? Like, yes, push to your edges, see how strong you can be, move into that challenge and competition with yourself. Like, understand that that's a very potent energetic to work with. And I don't know about you, I'm sure this has been true for you, but you've been lifting and you're like, oh my God, this applies to this and money and business.
Oh my God. Literally, like, I feel like every client call lately, I'm like, it's just like building a bicep.
Exactly. Like literally, there's so many parallels,
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Is that like something that you just started to try on more of and gain more confidence as you went?
Oh, for sure. So very similar. My dad, he owned his own gym. He owned his own CrossFit gym.
Wow.
And he always wanted me and my sister and I to be like the girls who went to his gym, and we just never were, like I was a total rebel. I smoked cigarettes and like that. I was in the like dark, I didn't want to do any workouts. I was just busy smoking. And as I got older, I would go through phases that were super inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they always came from wanting to prove myself to a man, aka wanting to prove myself to my dad. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big shadow that I worked through. And then when I quit my job, I remember one of the reasons I quit was because of my deteriorating health. I was a smoker of 12 years and didn't take care of myself, didn't eat healthy, didn't eat right, didn't
Yeah.
work out. So when I quit and had my whole awakening, it was like, okay, I need to do this for myself. And I don't just want to do this for myself because my health is deteriorating, but I want to do this to myself for myself because I deserve this.
Yeah.
And I picked up rock climbing, which was like a huge catalyst.
Ooh.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Gosh, we should go climbing. I'm in Colorado too, so
I would love
we should
that.
have a trip.
Let's
That
do
would be
it, please.
so fun.
Yes.
But yeah, so I picked up rock climbing. That was definitely a catalyst to like wanting to be stronger and pushing my edges and showing myself what I'm capable of, while also like allowing it to be like a good outlet and something healthy for myself. So yeah,
Totally.
that was yeah, the catalyst. And now it's like again, like how I show up for myself and the commitment that I make to myself to go to the gym and to be of service to my body is like the same equivalent to how I show up for my finances, how I show up for my business, all of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I feel like this is such an important aspect of success that most women, especially feminine energy women, miss
Yeah.
and hope that it's different. Like, this is going to be a little sassy for me to say, but like, this is one of the key pieces to making it work.
Yeah.
And I'm all about manifesting and being in your body and sensuality and magnetism. But if you're missing the devotion, commitment, doing whatever it takes, obviously in alignment with your values, but that doing whatever it takes mentality and pushing yourself to expansion, there is a balance. Like, if you obviously are doing that every day, 24 hours a day, imbalance, probably out of alignment. But
Yeah.
when you can harmonize, I love harmony. I love talking about harmony in terms of sound, energetic wavelength, also like embodiment and your mindset. But harmonizing that is going to teach you so much. And most people, this is very normal, are going to avoid what they need the most
Yeah.
because it's the most intimidating, right? Like, if you're the weakest, if you have the least amount of strength in one area, no one wants to be a failure starting out. No one wants to face the fact that they aren't good at something right away.
Yeah.
And learning what you're not good at is painful.
Yes.
I hate it. No one likes it.
We
You know
don't
what I
like it. Yeah. We don't like it. And we choose it because it builds our tolerance.
mean? 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tolerance has been such a word of, I guess it's just been in the air the last few weeks, especially. I got a puppy back in May,
Oh.
and I've never been so in touch with how intolerant I am or how impatient I am when it comes to some things and
Yep.
how selfish I am when it comes to some things. And like, if you would have asked me last year, like, Aislinn, you seem like a very tolerant, patient person, I'd be like, of course I am. Like, yeah, those are some of my best virtues. And now I'm like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. And I've been doing the work and it's driving me nuts, but I know it's worth it. You know, it's like I'm
Yep.
hanging in there. And I'm sure, you know, being a mom and like growing even more tolerance for things that push you to your edge, especially like when, you know, in this podcast, being in business or talking about success, we need to have tolerance for the very uncomfortable moments that help us grow, and not just success oriented or like, you know, numbers oriented, but tolerance and faith are really intertwined too, which is fascinating. And patience, tolerance, faith. Who are you when it looks like it's not working? Who are you when you seem to be failing? Who are you when a launch stops working? Like, are you, who are you? And I feel like, yes, being in the gym, practicing that divine masculine energy,
Yep.
practicing commitment and like pushing yourself to your edge and seeing who are you there. We also do that like with pleasure. You can push yourself to your edge in pleasure and pain and learn about both in different environments. But it's such an amazing soul school in those spaces. You know what I mean? Like, it's intense though.
Yeah, it is. And you guys, I would definitely like write down these journal prompts of like, who are you when it's hard and who are you when it's good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think it'll reveal a lot.
Something else is coming up about this because who you are when it's good means your nervous system is regulated, your needs are met, and you're probably thriving in some area. And you're associating that with safety. So, like, things are great. That's good. You're happy. But then when things are hard or things are not working, you're probably dysregulated. Your nervous system is in fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And you're in this space of survival and like who you are when you're surviving versus who you are when you're thriving is very different. And like, we just have to say, disclaimer, I'm a white woman. I know a lot about thriving in my life, and there's real scenarios of people who are really surviving, and that's a whole different level of conversation.
Yeah.
But in business, and when we're talking about money, we are talking about people's needs being met, and that level of like, am I safe? Am I not safe? So whether you're working out or you have a coach or you're addressing your nervous system tolerance levels, like these are all really important things to know about yourself, because if you can look down at your piece of paper, if you're journaling on this, and you can say, I am very cynical, I am very impatient, I have rage or anger, I go to worst case scenario, I want to abandon my loved ones, I want to isolate myself. These are all examples of who people are when they are not, when things are not going well, or when things are hard, you know? And as soon as things get hard, you can be like, okay, saying this out loud, this is that part of me. This is Aislinn in survival mode. This is Sarah in survival mode. Even though I'm okay and I have a roof over my head and my fridge is full of food, my nervous system literally thinks that there is a tiger over there and I should be doing what I can to survive.
Yeah.
Right? That is invaluable information to know about who you are, because when you know who you are, then you can start to do something about it and shift who you are. And that is, a lot of people think like, oh, that's going to be really hard to do. I'm like, not as hard as you think you are, because a lot of the work is just about knowing who you are and what happens and what kind of trigger response and reactions you have in those moments, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And like how it shows up in your body too. Like I know my like immediate, I know this always happens, and it's like me in the moment in real time training my nervous system to communicate like that I'm safe here, is like whenever I get a message of like disappointment, or like, hey Sarah, like I wish I would have gotten a call out, like I didn't do enough, immediate fight or flight. Like my I feel my heart drop to my stomach in a not great way. And yeah, and it's like that what am I saying? Like that feeling of like the heart dropping to the stomach is like my sign of like, oh, like I'm in fight or flight right now. Like let's nurture and soothe.
Yes, it's brilliant, right? Like, because when you can understand that that reaction is just wanting a need to be met, and you can ask yourself when you're not dysregulated, well, what need do I need to be met when I'm feeling like my heart is in my stomach? You know, I'm feeling like my heart is starting to race. My legs are about to just like run me into the horizon because like it's not really a conscious choice that you're making. It's a very subconscious choice. So I love that. Like, I need words of affirmation right now. I need a cuddle. I need a really long bear hug from my boyfriend, or I need a home cooked meal. I need to connect and co-regulate with people who have got my back. This is so helpful for anyone listening. Like, you got to write down a to-do list, or like I don't like that phrase, but
I get what you're saying. What I need in this moment list.
Yes, exactly. Right. And that's hard to do, because people are like, not on the top of my mind. I'll do that later. Not important. And then they cycle through those patterns again and again, because every time they're there, they're like, oh no, what do I do? And then they just kind of bury it because it feels traumatic, and they just never want to think about it ever again.
Yeah.
And then the cycle continues, right? So I think that's so key to know what you need. And this is another aspect of feminine leadership. And this is not just about women or men or feminine energy, masculine energy, but very much so connecting to your needs and being vocal about that. And even not to your loved ones or, to people around you. Yes, that, but ultimately first, yourself and to your higher power. Like, if you feel there's a big story going on for you that's like, I don't deserve to have my needs met, you're not going to show up assertively knowing that you can go and communicate that and have that need met, and or meet it for yourself, right? Because there's also going to be sometimes people are like, well, if you can't give this to me, then whatever, right? Like, you're insignificant to me, or like there's that survival coping mechanism of like,
Yeah.
okay, closing that door, like this conversation's done. Especially, I mean, I love talking about dating
Hmm.
around women in leadership and like who are women when it seems like, they're not being met or their needs are not being met. And like, what is your attachment response to
Yes.
this? And it's so illuminating when you're like, oh, wow, I tend to avoid all of those hard conversations because I feel like a burden, or I feel like I'm not good enough, or I super attach and try harder to gain that person's approval because I don't feel like I'm worthy of being seen, or I feel like I'm too much. I mean, whew, like there's so much there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's big. Really.
There's so much. I always say that like your relationship with money reflects your relationship with men based off of your attachment style. So,
Yep,
yep.
absolutely. Absolutely. How does that show up for you?
Oh,
So,
girl. So, yeah, I'm gonna ask you the same question in a minute, but I was a super
yeah,
anxious attachment style, but I also believe we dance throughout all of them.
great.
Like in some moments where I feel like a lack of control, I go to that anxious attachment style, right? Like I need to control if I'm really in lack.
Yeah,
However, sometimes when I'm in overflow, and this is what I want actually to hear your opinion on as well, when I'm
yeah.
in overflow, because I'm still dancing along my edge, right? Like I'm consistently pushing the amount that I feel safe withholding.
Yes.
Every time I'm in overflow, I'll go into an avoidant attachment style.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously not always. Luckily, I've done a lot of work around it and I feel very secure, but that's kind of my patterns.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think mine is very similar to yours, very similar. Lack or scarcity or dysregulation breeds anxious attachment. Um, and then when you're face to face with everything that you've ever wanted, you're like,
Yes.
ooh,
Yep.
bye.
Yeah. It's like, do I actually deserve this? I don't know. I'm gonna go run and hide because I don't know.
Yes. Or you create a bunch of stories about what's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Or like you try and find a thing that's wrong to prove yourself right,
Yeah.
which brings your power back into your control. So agreed. Like I would say I've healed so much of this, and the secure attachment that I have, it's something I'm really proud of. And my current partner and I, like, I think I worked through so much of this in the beginning of our relationship. And we started out really slow,
Yeah.
like really slow, and we were just working through these things and communicating about it and just being open and being vulnerable. Whenever I'd have that anxiousness come up, he held such beautiful space for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like, anxiousness attaches attracts avoidance a lot of the time. But based on those dynamics and what's happening and what needs are being met or not, there is definitely a gray area of like we can be in all of it. And there's, disorganized attachment also, which is like all of it all at once.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think most people would, oh, I don't want to generalize, but I think it's a really common pattern.
Yeah.
Anxiousness to control when you need to be more productive and create more and, meet more of those basic needs. And then when those basic needs are met, and then you're moving into thriving territory, it can be easy to just kind of take your focus off of that work, and it can easily shift into just not looking at things or not being as attentive and intimate with that work.
Exactly. Yeah. So speaking of that overflow piece that I talked about, you help women make a lot of money. Like that is one of your specialties through the lens of feminine leadership. And with the conversation of like attachment styles, nervous system regulation, I would love for you to speak to that, like how to allow women to feel that sense of like safety and empowerment in holding a lot of money.
Yeah, that is such a great question. And some people who are working on creating money and just enough,
Mm-hmm.
they would be so shocked at the amount of millionaires I work with who are still working through their money stuff
Yeah.
and are still feeling unsafe. And it's a process. It's a long-term practice of being in relationship to these kinds of things. So being in overflow, it really comes from, first of all, like being able to meet your needs. And like we were talking about before, who are you when you have the opportunity to shift into overflow? So on a very practical note, let's say you have your first 10K month, and it's more money than you've ever had before. If you don't know what kind of stories are coming up, if you're not doing the work to look at what you're making that mean, you can default into an old pattern very quickly. And it can feel very overwhelming, very stressful. It can feel like a big jolt, and in that moment, you have to look at how your nervous system gets to be addressed moment to moment.
Yep.
And who are you? What are your tendencies from an unconscious or subconscious way? Do you want to just go spend it all? Or do you want to put it in a bank account that doesn't ever see the light of day and just save it and hoard it for the rest of eternity?
Yep.
Most people tend to gravitate towards one or the other. And to be able to have that balance to move into overflow, you get to ask yourself, like, from the identity, from the version of me who is in overflow, how would I respect this money? Like, what would I do with it? If I truly, and maybe honestly, I want all my needs met and more. So yeah, I'm going to invest some of it. Yeah, I'm going to save some of it. Yes, I'm going to spend some of it, and I'm going to look at what kind of healthy relationship works for me. So overflow for a lot of women will bring up, and women specifically, someone's going to take it from me, or I'm going to be very irresponsible with it all. I'm going to lose it all. And here's what I have to say. It's kind of funny. Yeah, you might lose it all. Someone might take it. Who knows, right? Maybe you mismanage your taxes. We've all done these things. We all make mistakes. We all learn from doing.
Yeah.
And I've managed my money really well the last few years. And I've mismanaged it in a few different ways that I would have only learned about because of that mismanagement.
Yes.
So I think this comes down to self-trust and being well, I want to respect this the most. And if I fuck up, if I fail, if I flop, if I make a mistake, I can handle it. I'll learn from that. I'll make more money. I can move back into overflow. And that's the real work, because there's all of this well, what would I do if and when?
Yeah.
But the best way to learn about it is to recognize how are you managing or mismanaging your $5?
Yes.
Or $10? I'm about to open a masterclass called Date Your Money.
Oof, yes.
And it's about, if you want the rich divine marriage, right, you have to be well, who am I on date one? And it's the same thing with money. If you're wanting 6 figures in your bank account, if you're wanting a 7-figure business, but you're wanting to maybe only address money when you get there, you need to look at overflow right now. Could be putting $1 of $5 into a jar.
Yes. I'll tell you why I'm woo, over here in a minute.
Tell me.
So I'm doing a money challenge, a money manifestation challenge on TikTok right now. And the last 2 days was valuing every penny. And I think it's I'm so happy you spoke to that, because it's so true. How you show up in relationship to $5 is how you're going to show up in relationship to $50,000, to $500,000 if you're not doing the work.
100%. Yes.
And so I said in one of the practices today, I was start building the habit of saving. And it doesn't matter the amount, because it's all coming from the same source. Just transfer 10 cents, value 10 cents just as much as you would $10, $100,000, and so on.
Absolutely. I remember doing this ever since the beginning of my business, where, you start to see oh my God, that's $500 stacked. That's $1,000 stacked. Then you'll be shocked when it's $50,000 and you're just this is amazing. This is amazing. But you need to also, I'm sure you're teaching about this, but if you have those unconscious tendencies to sabotage it, it will be the most convincing thing in the world, and you're going to want to believe it. You're going to want to believe that this is justified. This is justified. This is justified. Your brain is going to be so good at
Yep.
making sure you're believing yourself, and shifting that pattern can be very challenging because it's going to take all of you to restrain yourself from the old pattern, to not do what your tendency is to do. If it's not healthy, of course. If it's healthy, keep going. Like keep with those tendencies. Absolutely.
So good. Okay. So we'll have to link the Date Your Money. You said it was called Date Your Money Masterclass.
Date Your Money Masterclass.
I know y'all are gonna love that. So yes. When is it?
So the details are still unfolding. I have to look at what the next couple of weeks look like, but my assistant and I are creating all the things behind the scenes right now. So announcing it maybe today. We'll see.
I love it. Well, as soon as you know, let me know so I can link it for the ladies listening.
Thank you.
I have a final question for you, and I kind of brought this up before we started recording, but your essence and your being and who you are is so kind and so loving and so open and so in integrity with everything that you speak about. And it's something that as a consumer of your work is just absolutely in awe over. And and I would love for you to just speak about the journey to becoming such an open-hearted woman, or if it was always in your nature, I don't know.
That's a really great question. I think that I've seen how much better my life gets when I have an open heart. And back in my early 20s, so many men would be like, Aislinn, like your heart is so closed off. And I'd be like, yeah, towards you, because like you're not worthy. Like, I have a sassy side. Like I have an edge. I have a very unapologetic, high standard side of me. But I also know that growing up, my mom was super open-hearted, like super emotional, very feminine, very vibrant, and also guarded in certain ways. And my dad had a very interesting relationship with his heart. He actually went through like a heart attack in his 40s and a few strokes since. And I feel like the heart in my family has been a very interesting theme. And how I've navigated those lessons really has led me to healing a lot of my heart. And I remember a few yoga classes where we were in heart opening poses, and I just had this emotion, these tears, like this just uncontrollable release of the heart. And it felt very overwhelming. And like it felt like I was out of control with that level of just like release and openness. And I've had a few of those moments in my life where it's just like heart blast, heart open, just healing, healing, healing. And as I control it more or understand it more, the more I'm connecting from the heart, the more I'm writing from my heart, the more that transmission attracts other people to me who are in their hearts, like you. And I feel like there's just so much to say about, women thinking that if their heart is open, and men, but like in our society, if your heart is open, you are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's scary to feel so much. And I've always felt a lot. I've been very like overly sensitive my whole life. Like seams in my pants as a 6-year-old would create tantrums for me. And like, I don't know, I've never officially been diagnosed with like sensory processing disorder, but I have a tendency to have that. And so feeling things has come always very naturally to me, but then being able to channel that has been the lesson the last probably over a decade. And my yoga practice really helped with that. But from the heart-centered lens of business, it wouldn't feel right to do it any other way, like creating from the heart and connecting from the heart is all I really know how to do. Yeah. And if that's that genuine energy that's flowing forth from me, I've seen how rewarding it is for other people to feel that and notice that. And it is very spiritual. I mean, it's very energetic. And, if I'm out in the world, like I'm just I'm not necessarily like heart beaming all the time, but it's such a fuel of love, and it's such a fertilizer to love. And in relationship, if you're heart open, you really know who people are in response to you, because there's no part of you that's really like holding back.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency also to like, you know, to hold back in the right scenarios. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So
Yep.
you end up learning as a woman, or with some, as someone who has a huge heart, you learn where it's safe to just glow and shine and let that be a huge part of your identity. And then where, it's best to just center yourself in other ways. But yeah, that's a huge conversation that we could always continue. But thank you for being that in me. I appreciate that so much.
Yeah, you are so welcome. Thank you for sharing it and for continuing to share it and do this work and not giving up. I think it's always such an important thing to recognize, because there's many times where, there were many outlets for all heart-centered and feminine-led leaders to not continue. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
I find that last little thing about this, our work, like you put your heart on the line.
Yeah.
And every single time a client says, okay, I'm complete, like it is a heartbreak.
Yeah.
Because you do form such a deep connection with them. And you couldn't be able to do that without having that heart play, and that skin in the game, so to say. But like there's so much richness that I think comes from the heart. I think wealth comes from the heart in like the most high vitality ways.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to see that like that is the prosperity generator, and that is where so much of your art is going to come from.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, from the feminine leadership lens, that's where abundance really is amplified. So, this work, it does break your heart all the time.
Yeah.
But you learn that like heartbreak happens, and then you attract someone else who's even in more alignment with the next level of what's opened up from the break.
Yep.
Makes sense.
It totally does. I'm thinking of the Rebecca Campbell quote of God bless the thing that broke you down and cracked you open, because the world needs you open.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, we could do a whole other episode on like feminine energy and grief and like heartbreak and heart opening.
Oh yeah.
So good.
Oh, I love it. Oh, well, this has been so amazing. What's your place of hang out the most? Instagram?
Instagram. Yep.
Awesome.
I was really active on Facebook a few years ago, and I've just started to decide like 2023, I think I might be showing up there a lot more.
Oh, how exciting.
Instagram. Yeah. So Instagram is the main hub. Find me on Facebook also if you want to connect there. I always love it if someone's like, hey, I listened to you on, Sarah's podcast. That's how I found you. I love knowing where people come from. So that would be so welcomed.
Amazing. Well, you heard the woman. Follow her, connect with her, let her know that you enjoyed this podcast, because I know you guys probably enjoyed it as much as I did. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. And Aislinn, thank you for bringing your magic.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Bye.